Hi everyone, in this video I'm going to show you how to use trig ratios to help you solve for missing sides or angles of a right triangle. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to circle the angle that we're using, the one that it says define or the one that is given to us. Then we're going to label the sides and mark in reference to that specific angle. So we're going to either have the opposite side in the hypotenuse, the adjacent side in the hypotenuse, or the opposite side in the adjacent. Then we are going to choose the correct trig function to use based on that pairing. So either sine, cosine, or tangent, and the ratios are there for your reference if you forgot. And then we're going to set up and solve our equation for the missing side or angle, setting it up with the trig ratio and then the angle equal to the ratio that we have. Now, before we get started, one thing we have to do is we have to make sure that our calculator we're using is in degree mode. So if you're using the handheld calculator, you go to a new document, you add a calculator, and in the top right corner, it should say DEG. If you're using the Inspire the app, okay, notice that mine over here under the 1.1 says RAD. So to fix this, we're going to hit this little gear button, and where it says angle, we're going to switch it to degree and then hit done. And now it's switched under that 1.1 to say DEG. If it says radian, you have to change it. If you can't figure out how to change it, come see me and I can help you get that figured out. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our notes. And we're going to focus using one trig function at a time. So I'm telling you we're using sine just to help you out. So first thing we do is identify the angle. Then we're going to label the sides in order to help us find what we're missing. So if I want to solve for x, I'm given x, which is the opposite side. And I'm given 34, which is the hypotenuse. So in order to find this, if I have opposite and hypotenuse, I am going to use the trig function sine of my angle. My angle is 29 degrees. And it's going to be equal to the ratio of opposite over hypotenuse. So that would be x over 34. Now, what we need to do here is we need to solve for x. So to solve for x, I'm going to multiply both sides by 34. When I do that, I get 34 sine of 29 is equal to x. Now, all we're going to do is type this into the calculator, and it's going to give us our x value. We're going to round on these to 2 decimal places. So go to your calculator. We're going to type in 34 sine. If you're using a yellow handheld calculator, you're going to look for the button that says trig. It's right underneath the yellow button next to the number 7. Okay, so I have sine and then 29. I press enter. We get 16.483. The 3 tells us that it can stay for 8. So our answer is 16.48. Okay, moving on to the next one. So first thing we do is we identify our angle. We label our sides. So this is opposite. This right here is the hypotenuse. So I know opposite, I know the hypotenuse, which means I'm using the sine function. So sine of my angle, 48, is equal to my trig ratio of opposite over hypotenuse. So opposite over hypotenuse, 24 over x. Now notice how this one is different than the first one because our number in the first one was in the denominator. Now our variable is in the denominator. So the shortcut that we do here is that we're going to switch the sine 48 with the x. That is our shortcut. and we get this. So now this is what we type into our calculator. So go ahead, go to your calculator, type in 24 divided by sine 48. Press enter, we get 32.295. That 5 tells us that the 29 becomes a 30. Okay, so going back to our notes, we get x equals 32.30. Okay, now looking at our next one, notice that we're solving for our angle in this one. We're solving for the angle. So if I'm solving for the angle, I still label my sides. So my opposite side is 7. My hypotenuse is 25. Opposite over hypotenuse means we're using sine. So sine of our angle x is equal to our ratio opposite over hypotenuse, which would be 7 over 25. So now, when we are solving for an angle, we use trig inverse. So we're going to use the inverse of sine with 7 over 25 on the inside. You only use sine inverse when you're solving for an angle. Okay, so sine inverse is to solve for an angle. Okay, so we're going to go to our calculator and type it in. If you're using the yellow handheld calculator, you still hit the trig button, everything works out. Okay, if you're using the desktop or the iPad app, you have to hold down sine and then select sine inverse. And then we have 7 over 25. And we get 16.26. And this is an angle measurement, so therefore we're going to use the degree symbol. So 16.26 degrees. Perfect. So that is 3 examples using sine. Now we're going to go to using cosine, but I'm actually going to maybe add a little bit and maybe solve for other angles and sides, just so you can see that you can solve for all sides and angles in this triangle. Okay, but first let's focus on what we're doing. So here's our angle. We're going to solve for x first. So to solve for x, now I notice that I have the adjacent side and I have the hypotenuse. Okay, so that means I'm using cosine. So I do cosine of my angle, 32 degrees, equals my ratio of x over my hypotenuse, 28. I notice that the 28 is on bottom, so all I need to do is just multiply both sides by 28. And in my calculator, I can type in 28 times cosine of 32, and that's going to give me what x equals. So I type this into my calculator. So let's go to our calculator. We're going to type in 28 cosine of 32. Press enter. We get 23.745. That 5 tells me that it's going to become 75 instead of 74. So I have 23.75 equals x. Now, let's say that I wanted to solve for the other missing side. Okay? If I wanted to solve for the other missing side, so let me label it y. If I wanted to solve for y, this would now be the opposite side. You always want to use information that you are already given. So I don't want to use the x value that I just found, just in case I made a mistake with rounding or typing it into the calculator. So if I wanted to solve for y, I'm still going to use y and the hypotenuse, which means I would use sine. So that would be sine of 32 equals opposite over hypotenuse. That would be y over 28. And then I would still multiply both sides by 28. And so in my calculator, I would type in 28 sine of 32, and that would give me the other leg of my hypotenuse. So let's type that in. So I have 28 sine of 32. It tells me that it's 14.84. 14.84. So notice how when I'm using or trying to find a different side, I use a different trig ratio. Okay. Now, let's say I wanted to solve for this missing angle up here. Well, all the angles in a triangle add to be 180. So I would just take 180 and I would subtract this 90-degree angle, and I would subtract 32, and that would give me that missing angle. So again, 180 minus 90 minus 32. That would give me 58. So this angle up here is 58 degrees, and that's how you can solve for everything in the triangle using trig ratios. Okay, so what I would like you to do is try to solve the rest of these problems just for what's given to you, okay? And then check your answers with mine and see how you did, okay? So I'm not going to work these out. If you have a question or you were not getting the same answers I am, please make sure you ask me in class. That way I can help you out, okay? So pause the video, give it a try. So please make sure that if you have any questions, you write them down and you ask in class or the next time you see me. That's it for this video, and I will see you in the next one.